Welcome back to The Road Chose Me. My name's Dan, and this week we're continuing the build on the Dream Overland camper. I need to show you how we fabricated the roof from scratch, and also how we dealt with the fuel filler, which is quite different on the diesel from the gas version. So strap in, let's keep building the Dream Overland camper. So to build the roof, we're going to use the same material we've used in a lot of other places. These panels, usually called 2-core 2. They're 2 plies of fiberglass, then a honeycomb core, then another 2 plies of fiberglass. These things are really strong, they're really lightweight, and they have a great insulation value, which is brilliant for our needs for the roof. The hard part is, you can't buy these things commercially in really big sizes. We need our roof to be 6 feet wide and 7.5 feet long, so we'll have to join 2 panels together. To do this, we need to fill in the little gap between the 2 panels, which is called potting the core. Michael's doing this with stuff called flocks, which is basically cotton suspended in resin. The idea is to make sure the gap is completely filled to add strength before we cover it over with sheets of fiberglass. And there's no reason to think that this won't be stronger than the original panels were. A lot like welding, you can join together and make it stronger than the original material was. To make the fiberglass strips that he's going to use, Michael lays down a piece of plastic on the table, then the fiberglass, then he impregnates it with resin. He also spreads a bit on the top as well and lets it get a little bit tacky. A new piece of plastic on top of all the fiberglass, then he cuts it into strips which are ready to use full of resin. Once you peel the plastic off the back, you can lay it down, smooth out all the wrinkles and air bubbles, and you're good to go. Once you take off the top piece of plastic, you can then come along and stipple out all of the air bubbles and add resin where it needs to be. After some drying time, we flip the top over and do exactly the same thing on the other side to really bring up the strength. As a final layer, Michael added what's called peel ply, which is a great way to keep the surface prepped and ready to bond something else. In this case, paint. This fiberglass join is not UV stable, and so on the outside of the roof, we really need to paint it to make sure the sun won't damage it. These 2 panels are exactly the right width, but they're a fraction too long, so we need to trim it to length with the router, which Michael has found works really well. The first pass cuts through the top sheet, and then the second pass through the bottom sheet, and you get a really nice clean cut through this material. Because Michael is such a thorough engineer, he decided to test our joint for strength. So there you can see the join, and he put the offcut in a fancy testy machine to see how strong it actually was. And here are the results. You can see where the panel ended up breaking, and it actually did not break on the join. So just like welding, the join is actually stronger than the regular material. And again, Michael's pretty thorough, so he did it to a few test samples. Now the roof panel is the exact right size, we can prep the edges to bond on the new aluminum trim piece. So as usual, it's a whole bunch of sanding and scuffing to knock off the gloss so that the adhesives will stick. And here you can see from this camera angle, have a look how it's not shiny outside the tape where I've been sanding it, but then the regular roof is very shiny. So you definitely want to knock off that shine to make sure that the glues will actually stick. This is a really important part of bond prep in composite materials. So the outside or perimeter of the roof will be pieces of aluminum angle that Michael previously welded into the right rectangle shape. And again, I have to do a bunch of bond prep here, scuffing it, and then activating it so that the glue will actually stick. We wait 30 minutes for the special activator to, well, activate. Then Michael lays down a nice thick bead of our fancy adhesive, and we're ready to bond on the big aluminum corner trim piece. Again, there are no screws or bolts holding any of this together. This is purely adhesive that brings the strength. And because we have such a massive bond line around all 4 edges, we know that this will be a really strong bond, so bolts just aren't necessary. There's no need to add the extra weight. So we go around and we're really careful to squish out all the extra adhesive, scrape it all off, clean everything up, and then when we take the tape off, we have a really nice fillet of adhesive that looks fantastic and will be plenty waterproof. Now we've flipped the roof over and I need to get to work adding features onto this edge trim piece. We've decided to add marker lights front and rear, and while our camper is not tall enough or wide enough to legally require them, we figure for the tiny amount of weight they add, there's no reason not to make ourselves as visible as possible when we're driving at night. And you can see here, I'm using another one of Michael's aerospace tricks. These little holders called clicos. Basically, you drill an 1/8 inch hole through our template, and then you put in one of these little things that helps hold everything in place before you drill any new holes. These are used in aircraft assembly to make certain that everything lines up. On the inside, we're adding another small piece of aluminum angle to help fill in the little gap and just to add more strength. So again, it's the usual story, a whole bunch of bond prep, activator, our fancy adhesive, and then we can actually start attaching our marker lights and roof latches. Our marker lights are little LEDs and they're orange on the front and red on the back. So as well as the marker lights across the front and the back, we also need to add latches to help keep the roof down and closed. We're putting them on the front and the back edge so that they won't get scraped off the side by tree branches and so that they're still easy to reach while standing on the ground. And eagle-eyed viewers will notice these are the identical latches that my J30 from Ursa Minor had, the pop-up roof I used around Africa. And actually, I bought these latches directly off Ursa Minor. These things are stainless steel and they're fantastic. There's no reason not to use them. To finish off the roof, I resume the never-ending job of wiring, and I'll tie these into the marker lights on the habitat once we lift the roof up. After all that wiring, I needed to bask in the glory, so I went and got the 12-volt battery charger and connected it up to all of my marker lights. Pretty sweet to see them all working, and that gave me a good energy boost to keep going and get this roof finished. Over on the habitat, we need to bolt on the little landing tabs that the roof latches will hold onto. And to add extra strength, we're going to put an aluminum plate over the composite. We call these spreader plates to help spread out the load. And you can bet we measured those holes about 93 times before we drilled them. Putting them in the wrong spot would be a colossal mistake. And like so many jobs on this project, once we had one of them completed and figured out our process, it was just a matter of repeating it in the 4 other corners. We went back and forward for a long time about how to contain the roof and keep it exactly where we wanted it to be. Because we put all of our latches on the front and back walls, nothing would actually stop the roof just sliding off the side. I mean, later on we'll have gas struts and mechanisms, but for now we don't have any of that, so we needed to make sure that it would stay put and that it would stay put exactly where we wanted it. And so Michael machined up these blocks out of ABS plastic, and we decided to rivet them into the roof here so that the roof will snag on them and essentially be constrained in place. These will make sure that our roof not only stays where we put it, but will also always go exactly where it's supposed to go. We added a rubber gasket around the bottom edge of the aluminum that'll get squished down by the latches to keep it all watertight. So after all of that, we've made a roof from scratch. All we had to do was carry it over, latch it down and plug in the marker lights, and that was it. We're totally watertight, which was our goal for now. In the future, we will absolutely have it off again. There'll be solar panels going on the roof, and we have to figure out the whole lifting mechanism. This will be a pop-up, and I haven't yet decided whether it will be a wedge or whether it will just go vertically straight up. In either case, there'll need to be some mechanism, some gas struts, obviously solar panels, and all of the wiring for those. That is all to come in the build. For now though, we just wanted to get it watertight so that we could get out driving it and get it on display at a couple of shows this year. Changing gears now, we need to figure out the fuel filler. This has been one of those jobs that we just keep putting aside, and every time one of us walks past, we have a good look, we think about it, we play around with all of the factory bits and pieces that we have, and we try to come up with a plan. Well, we can't bond in the inner fender well until we've figured this out, and that's holding us up on some other jobs, so it's time to figure this out. Michael bonded this nice big piece of aluminum onto the composite just to help protect it from any diesel or DEF splashes. And we'd really like to reuse the factory fuel door cover. It's a really nice solid metal thing, and we just need to trim the aluminum a tiny bit so that it will pop in there, and from the outside, this is going to look 100% factory. The fuel filler is in almost exactly the same position it was from factory. It's just further away from the center line of the vehicle. So what that means is, for the diesel filler, we need to make up an extra few inches of length. And to do that, we've decided to cut this factory steel piece in half and then join in a piece of rubber hose in the middle in exactly the right spot to help us make up that extra width. It took a lot of fandangling and a lot of careful trimming, and I'll show you the finished product. So we've just finished up the fuel filler, which has been quite a lot of work, and starting on the outside here, Michael made this really nice piece of aluminium that goes around, pick up any splashes or anything. On the inside, it looks exactly as factory, so the diesel filler is the big green one, that's the DEF filler on the right. So very, very much stock there at the diesel filler. Of course, the nice new badge, because that's important. And then let me show you on the inside, this is where all the technical work went into it. And so you can see here I am inside. This is the driver's side wheel well, which we're just about to bond in. That's physically the wheel well sitting there. Here's the one on the passenger side. So in a minute, we're gonna bond that in and fill in this whole area. But what we needed to do first was design and make all of this fuel filler stuff. And we knew all along this was a bit of technical risk for us because mine's a diesel and it's quite a bit different than Michael's gas engine version. We knew it was going to be more complicated in here. We didn't know the details. So Michael just tried to leave us a good amount of area where we could work with. We hoped for the best and it has worked out. So I'll talk you through what we've done here, all of the different systems. So first of all, on the back here, you can see this is the big diesel filler and it comes down. We extended it here with this flexible rubber hose. Then we're kind of using factory Jeep stuff and it curves and it goes around and then it joins into the factory Jeep line. We're really happy with that. Because we used a rubber line, we wanted to make sure it was grounded to try and make sure there are no sparks or anything. So we brazed that onto the steel that the filler would touch from the outside, and then this is our grounding strap that comes down and grounds that whole thing. So that should be good in terms of sparks or anything like that. Next to it, we've got the DEF line. So this is filling the DEF tank, and this is a slightly different rubber hose than what was here, but then immediately it joins into factory stuff just here. This is a breather line from the DEF tank. It just kind of goes up on top of the filler. It's a slightly different hose, but it's in exactly the same location, same configuration, so we're not worried about that. What else we've got going on back here, and again, this is more complicated than Michael's, there's this really big relay, which I assume has to do with the DEF tank. I know there's a heater in that tank, there's obviously a pump in that tank. This thing does not exist on the gas versions. I haven't actually looked at the wiring diagrams, but let's just say it's DEF stuff. We put it as high as we possibly could to keep it out of any water when we're crossing rivers. This is higher than it used to be mounted on a stock Jeep, so I'm happy with that. And then this guy is a breather for the diesel tank. And you might remember this was originally on the other side in the wheel well. We've rerouted it over here underneath on the top of the tank. I joined in this hose. This is all fuel safe, diesel safe hose, by the way. Joined in this hose and it comes around to the breather. And again, we assume this exists so that the tank can breathe when you're filling it, and also so that when you're using diesel, the tank can breathe. It doesn't wind up with some sort of airlock in there. And what we've done here, the reason it looks like this, is that this flap separates basically the wheel area from all of this stuff. So this guy's carbon fiber, he is super strong, super durable. This will take all the rock impacts, all of those things that are coming off the tire, but then all of this stuff back here is safe. Obviously it's going to get a bit of mud on it, a bit of dust, all of that, but it did in the stock Jeep anyway, so we're not worried about that. And what we've done is that this guy is removable from the outside. If I need to get in here and service any of this filter does actually need to be changed sometimes, or if anything goes wrong, even with the wheel well bonded in permanently, I can undo these mounting bolts. This whole plate will fold flat and then I can access all of this. And actually there's pretty good access from the outside. That's basically how we built most of it while we were sitting outside the camper. So there you go, that is a technical rundown of the whole fuel filler area. And as I've said a few times now, you can see the devil is in the details on a build like this. The entire box and everything, it only took us a couple of days really to mount it. And now we've just sunk more than a couple of days into just this tiny little area that's about 2 square feet. So sometimes it's the details that end up sucking up all of the time. But overall, super happy with how it's turned out. Now we can bond that wheel well in. We're getting really close to finishing up in here. And bonding the wheel well in is exactly what we did. Of course, it needs all of the usual bond prep with all of the sanding and scuffing, activating, and then we were able to lay down a bead of our favorite adhesive and actually bond it in there, finally completing both wheel wells, the floor, the whole rear interior now is a sealed weatherproof box. Feels like a huge milestone, and this has been a really, really big step and removed kind of our last piece of technical risk of, will this even work? So thanks again for watching. If you've got any questions about the build, please do leave a comment, ask away. I'll either answer it in the comments or I'll make sure I cover it in a future video. As always, I need to say thanks to my supporters on Patreon. They're getting behind the scenes access, they're getting early content, they know where this thing's going next year. I'm getting quotes right now to stuff it into a shipping container. All of that stuff is available over on Patreon. Jump over it, there's a link in the description and you can check out all of those benefits. But until next time, as always, thanks for watching, have fun out there, and just maybe, I'll bump into you on the road.